with their eye firmly on that market of 5 billion people around the planet who can't get enough energy. We know that we can't deliver that energy to those people using traditional means. We'll pollute the planet out of existence. So the big gains to be had over the next decade or 2 or 3 are building the new energy economy. And America needs to invest in that. So its own manufacturers and its own chambers of commerce and businesses are in a good position to take a slice of that enormous market that's emerging. So unless we get the cap and trade bill through and unless the appropriate investments are made, this country is going to lose its place in the world, I'm afraid. We can see that already happening with China moving ahead so swiftly. So yes, there'll be some increase now, modest increase now. It's not going to send anyone broke. We've seen that in Europe. We've seen their economy expand and prosper as they've taken on cap and trade. But the investment is critical.
And yet there are some members of the environmental movement here in the United States who question the use of the cap and trade as a means of addressing the problem. Could you respond to those concerns?
Sure. Look, cap and trade by itself is not enough. But it is essential in terms of these international negotiations. And one way of showing that is to look at the alternatives. Just say the US went with a carbon tax. That would leave the President in a position where he'd be going to Copenhagen and saying, look, we've got a carbon tax, but we've got no idea really what it's going to do in terms of our emissions profile. So countries would just say, well, what are you actually pledging to? How are you going to deal with your emissions? You know, the only method really to allow countries to see transparently what other countries intend to do and then share the burden equally is through a cap and trade system. So it's not enough to deal with emissions overall, but it is an essential prerequisite for any global deal on climate change.
On the issue of cap and trade, many environmental and watchdog groups have opposed the system. This is Tyson Slocum of Public Citizen about cap and trade on Democracy Now!
Look, Public Citizen supports strong, effective climate legislation, and the fact is that this bill does not do that. We can talk about the aspirations of hoping to achieve greenhouse gas emissions reductions, but when you look at what this bill will do, it will not result in significant reductions. It creates a legal right to pollute for industries and gives away credits for free to allow companies to meet those targets without having to pay for them. And that is simply not going to spur the kind of investments we need. President Obama had it right when he announced in his budget in February that if you wanted to pollute, you would have to pay for the right to pollute. And by holding an auction, the government would raise hundreds of billions of dollars that could be reinvested back to the American people to offset the impacts of higher energy prices that a cap-and-trade program would bring, and to spur billions of dollars in needed investments in energy efficiency and renewable energy.
Tim Flannery.
Look, cap-and-trade does work. It does do part of the job we need to do to get to where we need to go. We see that in Europe. They had a similar system of giving away permits, but the 5% reduction over 1990 levels that cap-and-trade system was intended to generate have actually happened. The US, I know the bill isn't perfect, I know there's a lot of giveaways in it, and I know a lot of people are unhappy about provisions for subsidies for nuclear power and so forth, but we just have to get moving on this. We have to empower the President of the most powerful nation on earth to be able to negotiate and lead, and cap and trade is really about that. And besides, I really do have faith that that system will bring about the reductions of 14 or 17% below 2005 levels that it pledges. It's a comprehensive bill. In the agricultural area, it is really good. It does things that no other nation has really looked at doing. So could I just make a personal plea to Americans to support this bill? Imperfect as it is a first absolutely essential step for this country to engage and lead and empower others in other parts of the world.
Well, Tim, as you head off to the airport to increase your carbon footprint, we'll let you go because I know you have to catch that flight. Tim Flannery, Australian scientist and writer, Australian of the Year 2007, has a new book called Now or Never, Why We Must Act Now to End Climate Change and Create a Sustainable Future. But Bill McKibben is with us. Not that he's off the hook around increasing his carbon footprint since I think he's traveled the entire globe in the last 30 days, but Juan?
Yeah, Bill, I'd like to ask you about these solutions in Congress, not only in the Senate, but also the Waxman-Markey bill in the House, and how you think that they are addressing the U.S. role in terms of reducing its own carbon footprint.
They're clearly, the text from which people are working now, they've got to be strengthened if they're going to do what we need them to do. They've got to be strengthened in a lot of ways. One of the things where they fall the shortest is when we get to Copenhagen, part of the deal is going to be how much aid in terms of technology and resources will go north to south in order to let countries leapfrog over the fossil fuel era and so on. The British government estimated recently that it would take about $100 billion of aid a year to help countries adapt in the poor parts of the world and to help them make this transition. That number, $100 billion, may be low to begin with, but the two bills in Congress allocate about $750 million with an M dollars to this task. That's derisory. It's an insult going to Copenhagen, considering the fact that the 4% of us who live here have produced 25% of the world's CO2. It's why we're so happy that this weekend there'll be 1,800 events taking place in all 50 states across the U.S. Not just the biggest day internationally, but the biggest day of climate action in U.S. history. We need some pressure on Washington and on Copenhagen.
Well, especially, isn't it true, since much of the pollution created by industries in the third world is really a result of European and American-based multinationals who have established their production facilities and their mining facilities and all their operations in these third world countries.
One, there's that. And there's also, probably even more powerfully, we're spreading quickly the notion of what modernity is supposed to look like. And if modernity only means riding around in your own automobile and having a big flat-screen TV and trying always to build a bigger house farther apart from your neighbors, which has been the American dream for half a century, then we don't have a prayer. Our influence in this has been overwhelming, and we need to take real responsibility now.
Bill McKibben, finally, on this issue of President Obama, he just went to Copenhagen to push for the Olympics taking place in Chicago. Is there really a question about whether he will go back there on this issue? You have called this meeting perhaps the most important meeting to take place in world history. Why do you say that?
Here's the thing about Obama and Copenhagen and everything else. We can't blame our leaders yet because we haven't built the kind of movements that demand that they do things and that give them the political space to do it. If Copenhagen is a failure, that failure will be measured not in decades but in geological time. President Obama can't let it be a failure. None of us can let it be a failure. Everybody who's listening to this, there's a rally or event happening within a few miles of their home tomorrow. If they go to 350.org, they can find out exactly where it is. Make some noise. We've got no right to complain about our leaders until we've given them the leadership they need. That's how it works.
Well, we want to thank you very much for being with us. Bill McKibben, co-founder, director of 350.org. It was 20 years ago that he published The End of Nature. Democracy Now! Will be in Copenhagen for the 2 weeks of the conference in December. We'll be broadcasting to you every day and bringing you the reports of what's happening in the streets, what's happening in the meetings, and what's happening around the world. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. When we come back, a quick update on the Supreme Court decision around Blackwater, and then we're going to talk about U.S. policy. Is it changing in regards to Sudan and Darfur? Stay with us.
بسماعتك تخلي الدنيا شمسية بغمزة طفلة تشرع وتتصرع إذا باريت بالأبانوس سنيناتك بسماعتك بسماعتك بشم ريحة الجروف مغسولة به وهج القناديل وشوف برقني غازل وانبو سرا في عويناتك الحب